All right, welcome back, everybody. We are on chapter 6, and I'm not going to lie to you. I think this one is going to be a bear for the majority of you. It's going to take some time, especially if you're not comfortable with the concept we've learned so far. This week is going to be like the other weeks. I want you to watch this video and read the chapter. You may find that reading the chapter before the video gives you a little insight into what I'm talking about. You may find it the opposite. Either way, you can do both. Watch the local storage video from Cengage and follow along. It'll also give you some insight into the project that we're getting ready to do. You will do the self-test exercises in Cengage. There's only 6 of them, and these are questions that you really should be able to answer. The programming exercise and the quiz. Now, I'm going to try and go over a little bit of the programming exercise here. Make sure that everybody understands what we're learning in the lesson. Can be a little complicated. So if you remember from last week, we created this page and 4 other pages for our application. This week we're going to do we're going to add functionality to this pin pad, and we're going to use what I call the patient data page. I'm not sure what you called it, but where you enter the name, the first name, last name, password, height and weight for the BMI calculator. We're going to do some of that. We're going to add all that information and put it in local storage. Before we start on the lesson, there's a few things I wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of. Most developers know that these tools exist, but you may not. So if you right click, if you're using Firefox or Chrome, you'll get this little inspect option here. If you click on that, these are the development tools. Here you can see your HTML or the HTML of any page that you're on, what the class is, the styles, and all that good stuff. The console is good because you can type code right in here and see what it does. Let's see. I don't remember what any of my divs are called. From the index to the body. Let's see what happens when I do this. So it wrote to the document, hello world. It got rid of, when you do the document right, it rewrites everything. But if you just refresh the page, your stuff comes back and it's fine. When you start this project, there's going to be some things you need to do. I realized that when doing this, what I used to do was just I would load one password into local storage so that this page would work. But I figured that the whole project in general would work better if you already had a database created. So this link here, local storage function, is a function that you need to put into your code. And when you put it, we'll put it in the body so that when the body of a page loads, this function fires and populates a database for you. When you click on it, it's going to be just like this function and does some cool stuff and adds some stuff into your database. I think I already did that. Let's see. Online local storage. Okay, so this is what you need to do on your index page. I'm sorry if you hear beeps and bops. I work 3 jobs and they all sometimes converge. So on your body, on your index page, this is the password page. You can call it password. I call it index. Generally, an index.html is the first page that will load when you go to a website, but you can change that. But I just left mine as index. On the body, you're going to do onload, load local storage, and then in your JavaScript page, you're just going to go. You're just going to copy this, Control C, Go back into your project and Control V, and that's it. It should work. Should being the operative term. If you edit something and it doesn't work, you need to figure out what you edited. But you can check and see if it worked by going to your index page and then right click, inspect. The console is important. Click on these characters, or it's set up a little bit differently in Chrome. I'll show you that too, just so you know. In Firefox, go to storage. Here you can see we got cache storage, cookies, IndexedDB, local storage. That's what we want. We're using local storage. Click on this file and you can see that there is a database called the patient DB, and it is populated with an array of information. And inside you have a first name, last name, date of birth, password, height, weight, and gender for 6 people. It says 5. Remember, array. This is an array and it starts counting at 0. So we got some interesting folks here. But this will allow you to have some data to work with during the project. And if you start messing up, all you have to do is refresh the page. It reloads the data and you're not lost anything, as long as you don't mess with the function in the beginning. So that is the inspect and the console. The console is also good if you have errors or if your code is not working correctly. Go into the console and look for those errors and see what it's telling you that error is. Maybe you have an extra comma somewhere, an extra bracket somewhere. That may pick it up, and it'll save you a lot of time and headache trying to find that one bracket amongst all this code. And also, when we go to storage, you'll be able to check and see if your functions are adding data properly, looking for data properly, deleting data properly, and all that's very important. So this is a good way to make sure it's all working. Let me use Chrome real quick. New tab. Why didn't I do that? I just need to go here and do the thing and the other thing. Chapter 6. Open with Chrome. So if you go to inspect, right click, inspect, it'll open on the side. It looks a little different. I actually like the dark theme better. Let's see, go to, is it memory? Not memory. Sources, no. Well, here's your console. It says it failed to load the Ajax loader.gif, which is a good thing. I think one of us was having an issue with that loader not going away. Not sure why, but you can ignore that. You can also ignore this warning about the map. Elements, where is... Okay, so under application, and you got storage over here. See local storage file, and then here's your patient database. And you can see that the database is loaded in properly. And this is Chrome. If you're using Chrome, I prefer Firefox, which I will continue to use. All right, so sometimes when you're doing a lot of things and they all have to work, they will have to work together, some independent, some together, some one has to work before the other one has to work. It's good to write out a little kind of an outline of what your application or program is going to do. I kind of did that a little bit, but for the password pin page, we need to make sure that the buttons work, right? So when we push these buttons, it adds stuff in here. So that works. We need to make sure that we can clear or reset the input. Oh, and last week, the pin pad looked a little different. Sorry. You will have to add a button this week, this backspace button, because we want to be able to backspace the data too, and then I just moved the enter button down here. First, so we need to be able to clear or reset the data, and that's simple. Maybe you did that last week, but that is a simple little function. And I'm going to spare you guys. You don't have to watch me type it all out this week. So document get element ID passcode, because that is what on the index, that is what the ID for my input is, right? The input type is a password, the ID is passcode. So we can get that element, and we're going to change the value to nothing. That's it. One line of code. Your reset button is done. Just make sure on the index page that when you push the reset button, it calls the on-click reset function. So boom, our too much stuff open. Boom, our reset works. Blah blah blah. Reset works. Outstanding. The next thing we need to do is able to backspace one character. Let's say you're getting your password 1 2 3 4 5 8. Oops, you meant to push 6. You want to be able to backspace and just lose one character. That should work. The next thing that we're going to do, I guess before it can backspace, it needs to enter. Okay, so it needs to enter the password by pressing buttons. Okay, so in order to enter the password by pressing buttons, I'm really trying not to give you guys all the code, because you're going to learn so much more figuring it out on your own. I'm afraid that this just may be too much information for 1 week. So the first thing we want to do is create a function, add value to password, and I believe it's the same as in the book. Actually, the book shows you how to do this. You want to create a variable so that the web page will get the element passcode. It will get the value of the element passcode, and then it will assign it to the variable current value. We want to put that backspace function in here. So if the button that's pushed is equal to backspace, and again, we got to come back in here, and you see we're adding value to password and we're passing it a digit, right? So 1 through 4, 1 through 7, 1 through 9, 1 through 9. And that adds the 1, 2, 3, 4 to that input. We want the backspace button to add backspace. Add value to password, backspace. So it could be anything. It could be 10. It could be another number. We chose backspace here. So if the button is equal to backspace, it's going to take this current value string, and it's going to look at the substrings and take 1 away from the current length. So it's going to start at 0, and it's going to go the entire length of it. So if it's 2 or it's 10, it's going to go look the entire length, get that number, and it's going to minus 1. And then it's going to rewrite back out to the passcode variable on the HTML. It's going to change the value to that current value. So it's going to lose that 1. Otherwise, if it's not a backspace, we'll go back down to this else statement, and it will just keep adding whatever buttons pushed, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that's it. What is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines of code, and your backspace works. Super simple. This is what I had done in the past before creating a database. To to check the password, I would simply, if you run this function, in fact, we can do this in the, or if you run this command, window local storage set item password to 123456, right? So what this is going to do, if we come into our password here, we go to our console, put in that command, what this is going to do is it's going to write to local storage. It's going to set the item password to 123456. I know it says undefined, but if you go back in here to storage, there it is, password value 1234, stored in local storage. So now you have your database and this variable key value pair. And that is how I would use the key thing before. I would just run that real quick. So it would add it to local storage and then check it in the local storage. I mean, it worked for demonstration purposes. But now that you actually have a database, we're going to do a little something different. We're going to check that pin, right? So here's where we're going to start using these JSON objects. We're going to grab the document in the passcode input, right? Or grab the value. We're going to grab the value of the passcode element on the web page. And then we're going to go into, this is what the JSON elements are, or the JSON objects. So we're telling the computer using JavaScript to go in and parse local storage. It's going to get the item with the patient DB. Now remember, that is an array. We're going to store that array into the variable codes. You can ignore this. This is, well, let's not ignore this real quick. Jump right in here. I'm going back to the console. If you put these console.log in your code, if you're having issues, then you can go back in here and let's see. When you put in a passcode and you hit enter, since passcode is not valid, you go into your console and it's logging here. What did that just log? We told it to log two things. We told it to log PC, which is the passcode variable, the value of the passcode, and we told it to log codes. I don't think it did codes right. Probably because it's an array. So it did not. You see, and right here, it tells you the file, check password. It's my JavaScript file. And it's on line 38. So you know where it logged from. Because sometimes you'll get a hold of them in there. Well, that's not right. It's not 38 or 13. Anyway, a lot of times it'll give you the line numbers. I'm not sure what that 3813 meant. But it did log the PC because that is what we're looking at right here. That's the code I typed in right there. So it logged that. Probably why it didn't do the goodness. It didn't do the codes because it's an array and you have to iterate through those arrays. Remember, we have to do a for loop. We're going to do that right here. Var I, var length. I'm going to fix this a little bit too. I like to streamline and not have as many codes, as many lines as I need. So you can do a loop this way. You declare a variable I, which is going to be your counter. Then you can declare a length or another number. So you're going to start at 0 and get to whatever number. In this case, we want to get to whatever number we need to get to, however long that is. So we're going to reach out, grab the length, have the computer tell us how long that thing is, and that's going to be the number. Here, I like to do this. I equals 0. And then we can get rid of this. And then, as long as, okay, so the variable I is equal to 0. As long as I is less than codes dot length. Instead, before I was just storing that into a variable and plugging the variable in. It's kind of a waste of space. So as long as I is less than the length of this array that was taken from the patient database thingamabobber, then it will add 1 to I. And each time it goes through and does that, it's going to check and see if the PC code, or the code, the thing that was typed into the screen that we stored in this variable is equal to the password element of the codes array with the index 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, however long codes is. If they match, so if it goes through and it sees that the password typed into the web interface and a password in the database is the same, it's simply going to take the person to the about page. Otherwise, it's going to say it's not valid. It's not in the database. Man, is that it? That is it. So we come back to our PIN code. I don't know what, I can't remember what all those passwords I put in there, so I may accidentally hit one. But you can see, type it in, reset works. That was one of them. Backspace works like it should. I can add and enter, backspace, backspace. This console may come in handy if you're doing, every time you hit backspace, you may want to log the passcode so you can see that it's actually working like it's supposed to. Backspace all the way, and if I get the password correct and hit enter, it takes me to the about page. And that's it. We're done with the passcode thingy. It works like a charm. Doesn't always, does it? All right, so, and this is, you should have created this again last week. We got your about page, your patient info, your graph, which is empty, and your Rex page, which we hadn't got to yet. What we're concentrating on, the about page is done. The patient info page, and this is the workhorse of the whole app right here. So there's going to be a little work here. And what do we need this to do? Probably a few things I forgot. You need to be able to enter patient data in the inputs. Obviously, you want to be able to put names in here. John Jones was born on, I don't know, January 1st, 2000. He's not in the database yet. Again, we can go back and look, because I forget who's in here all the time. You can go in here and look and see who's in the database, who's not in the database. You can check all this stuff. But he's not in the database. So he's going to need a new password. Otherwise, the password will just be blank. And then if we go back to the index, and you just hit enter and the thing's blank, it'll let you through. A quick caveat here. This is for educational purposes only. Please don't ever put a production password PIN thing in here that works like this. That's just bad. This is so you understand how it works. Generally, you're going to use probably an email and a username or a password. They're going to have to be unique. But much more than that, it's going to be secured. You're going to have to salt it and hash it and everything else. That's beyond the scope of this course. This is just so you figure out how stuff works. So password, new password, all zeros. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We'll give him a height of 6 feet, entered in inches, and a weight of 200 pounds. He's a big dude. Wait a minute. I weigh 200 pounds. I'm not a big dude. And then, so from our checklist, we can enter patient data, check. We need to be able to add patient data to the database. So when we click the add button, we want to be alerted that the patient information has been added to the database. And if you're not writing down these steps, my little checklist is not quite complete. I want to see these validation alerts. So make sure you have the alerts. If something's right, if something works right, I want the person alerted. If it goes wrong, the person needs to be alerted. So now we can see I just added him to my database. John Jones, birth date. And you'll notice that the birth date stores differently than you type it in. I think that's just a jQuery thing. As long as it gets in there, I'm happy. And then the height and weight. So let's go back to here. That is our stuff for the index. I'm trying to go through piece by piece so everybody is clear. So before we add something to the database, there are a couple things we want to do. We want to ensure that all the fields are full. All the fields have data entered. We don't want anything not entered. We don't want to leave out a birth date or the height and weight. That's kind of the point of it. So the first thing we're going to do is check the form, right? And we are simply going to make sure this isn't great validation because like the text first name, we're just making sure it's not empty. And we're making sure the last name is not empty. And we're making sure the birth date is not empty. And so on and so forth, height and weight. Real validation would be making sure the first and last name only used alphanumeric letters, no numbers, no special characters. Make sure the birth date was a valid birth date, not today's date. You know, maybe they're over the age of 18, something like that. We'd have to do those kind of validations. And then the height and weight, we may want to put some limits on those too. If somebody adds 800 instead of 80 or 720 instead of 72, that's, you know, 3-digit height is odd. But anyway, this is a fraction of the validation that you would normally do in a normal program. Good enough for right now, though. So if all of this is true, we're going to return true. Otherwise, we're going to return false, and we're going to alert the user and say, hey, has all the information been entered? Make sure all the information has been entered. So they can go back and say, oop, missed the height, type that in, hit the enter button, and then roll on. Then what we want to do before we actually add it to the database, we want to make sure that it's not already in the database. You know, somebody may not know when you get thousands of records in there, you don't know who's a customer and who's not. So somebody may try to add that information again. We don't want it added a second time, but we might want it updated from previous information. Maybe they gained a lot of weight. Maybe they grew 7 inches. Either way, maybe they want to change their password. Simple change of the password. So we're going to have to make sure that that database is checked first. In this, again, simple example, we are just going to check for the first name and the last name. We are going to make sure that the variable for last name from the HTML page is, we're going to see if it is equal to, or again, all right, let's start over. Remember, we're looking through an array. And the first thing, well, all right, back up. Let's do this. We are going to declare a global variable. And this is so you don't have to add it to every single function that you do, because it gets to be a little intensive. And if you remember what I said this does, it's we're going to parse the JSON, or JSON parse the local storage. We're going to get that patient DB, and we're going to take it out of the JSON object and make it an array. And I'm just calling it DB, you can call it whatever you want. So this variable, now this DB variable is now an array with all of our patient information in it. Then how do we count? How do we get through that? We have to loop through it, loop through the data. So we go again, we're going to make a variable I. If I is less than the length of the database, whatever length that may be, we're going to increment it. And every time, every object in that database or that array, we're going to look at. If the first name value that's on the web page is the same as the first name value on the in the database index that we're currently looking at, and the last name on the web page is the same as the database index last name that we're currently looking at, it's going to alert. Actually, this is a confirm, not alert, and I don't know if it shows you this in the book or not. It looks like an alert, but it actually has the OK and cancel buttons on it instead. So if the confirm comes back true, so if they hit OK on the confirm, here, let me just show you what happens. So he's already in the database, but I want to add him again. This is the confirm, comes back with OK and cancel. It says, hey, the patient's already in the database. Do you want to update the record? So you can hit cancel if you made a mistake and nothing happens. But let's say we do want to change something, and let's say he got shorter and fatter, like I do often. You go to add, because we're just checking on first and last names. It says patient's already in the database. You want to update the record. Hit OK, and if you look, his height and weight has been changed, but there's not been an additional record created. Just change the one there. And this will work for password. I think the book wanted you to do the password, but for this we're doing height and weight and whatever, just because it all works the same. So that is the confirm, and like I said, this is nice. If you hit OK, confirm returns true to the program, so it's seeing true, and that is why this says if confirm, because this just means if the confirm's true, then we're going to edit the info. And we'll need another function for that, won't we? So, if they do want to edit the information, we're going to create a variable called patient. And this is going to create a key value pair and then stick it in an array or whatever it says. But that way it fits the format of the DB array that we already have out here. So this is going to take everything off the web page, first, last, and it's going to update everything if it's changed. And then we have to loop through. We have to do a few things with that. So again, this is, instead of using I used K. It's just a counter, just like everything else. K0, as long as it's less than the length of the database, we're going to add 1. So we're going to go through the database here, and if the database 0 for the first time, if DB0 first name is equal to patient first name and patient last name, we're going to store that index, in this case 0, in this variable. And I did a console log here. You don't have to do that unless you want to. That's just for me when I was coding. We're then going to take the DB index height. We're just updating the height and the weight. Now we should probably do the password here. Let's just do height and weight. Easy enough. We're just updating height and weight, right? So it's gonna get that index in the DB, and then it's going to take what's on the HTML page, the value of the text height and the value of the text weight, and add it to. It's going to change those indexes in the DB variable that was pulled from patient DB. It's going to change that. And then we need to push it back out to the database. So remember, this DB is a variable inside of our JavaScript function. Then we pulled that from local storage. Now we need to push it back out to local storage. And to do that, we use stringify. We're going to set the local storage set item. We're going to set that patient DB, and then we're going to stringify the DB variable. And that's how it changes. It doesn't look like it changes when you do stuff because it all stays the same and it works so quick, except for those two things change. That is what we're doing. So every time you edit local storage, you pull it out, you edit it, and you put it back. You pull it out by parsing it, storing it in a variable, changing that variable, and then stringifying it back into local storage. Simple enough? I hope so. That took me a long time to figure out. But again, it's like riding a bike. Once you get it, you're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. And you can move on from there. I hope this is making sense to everybody else. If it's not, please send me an email early in the week. All right, so we checked for existing patients. We checked the user form. We checked for existing patients. We can edit the info. We still haven't done the add info yet. So if they're not in the database and you want to add them, you run patient add. And again, remember, this gets a little funny because we're bouncing back and forth between the HTML and the JavaScript. But all your buttons, just make sure your buttons work like they're supposed to. Make sure that they are properly identified. And when you do the on click, the search button hits the search function. The add button hits the add function. The delete button hits the delete button. The clear button hits the clear button. It's the clear function. So here we're going to click patient add. And when they click the add, it checks for existing patient. If there's no patient there, we're checking first and last name. If there's not one that matches, it's gonna return true. Right. Goodness gracious, confusing. Check user form. Does it check user form? It does check user form. It checks existing patient first. I think you can do it either way, but okay, so it never hits this. Yeah, okay, so it returns true. Check existing patient returns true. Then it goes down to the next if check user form is true. So you don't have to put is true in here. It just, if user form is true, then it is. But if you want it to be, if you want to check and see if it's false to do something, then you're probably going to have to do this. Flash. It's like, why is it not turning blue? False. But if it's true, we will, oh, and if run equals 0. So I had a little issue trying to figure out, it just wasn't working right. So I created this little variable run. And again, it's a global variable. I just stuck it up here with this one. Like that, boom. And where is that at? I just glossed right over it after stringify. After it edits patient info. So it checks the user database, finds there is a patient, asks you if you want to edit the stuff. You say yes. It goes through and edits it. I wanted to change this so that it showed that it ran. It changed run to 0. And then I don't know, something wasn't working. This is what I did. This was my workaround. But it checks the user form and makes sure that all the data is in there, all the forms are filled out. It's checking to see if the if the edit function ran. If it did not run, it's going to create this patient variable. Should probably and add all this information just like it is stored in the database. It's going to push it to the DB. Remember, we declared the DB up here at the very top, the global variable. So it's going to push it, and what push does, it just kind of adds it on the end. it's going to push patient, which is the same format as everything else. So it's just adding another index to that array with all the information in it. And then again, we stringify local storage set item patient DB to stringify the DB, JSON stringify the DB. So we edited that variable. Now we're pushing it back out to local storage. And then you tell the user the stuff's been added. And then we make sure that run is returned back to 0 in case it was 1. Remember that and see if you make it different. So that adds the patient to the database, and I know mine works because I've done it already. Jane Doe 10202-2001. I don't know, I just hit some numbers. Let's say she's I don't know, 4 foot tall. She's 100 pounds. She's a female. We add, it just says added to the database, and boom, there it is. So it works. So go back to our checklist. What else we got to do? We validated that the all the fields were good with the check form function. We're able to edit with the edit info function. We need to be able to search the database by first and last name, and that's going to be fairly similar to some of the other stuff we did. So searching the database, search database function, declare variable found. Why is that not var? I've done that in a couple different places. You'll find your code will work if you don't do some of these things. Like I forget semicolons all the time, like this one, and it will work, just it's bad practice. And if something does go wrong later and you can't find it, then it's a pain. So just try your hardest to remember all the little things. So we're going to iterate through the DB again. Remember, use our counter, starts at 0. As long as it's less than the length of the database array, we're going to add 1. And every time we go through, we're going to see if the first name, the value of the text first name object on the HTML page is the same as the first name of the DB object with the index of I. Same with the last name, checking first and last names. If they are the same, it's going to get the value from the HTML page, and it's going to enter all the information. So it's going to reach out. Nope, I'm doing this backwards, I think. No, it's going to reach out. So this would be blank. No, you can put the first and last name in there. You put in the first and last name and it checks the database. If they match a record, it's going to populate the HTML page with these document get element ID tags with the information from the database. Now you really don't need these because we're using the first and last name to search with, so they'll already be populated. You can do it if you want to, whatever. But it's gonna populate the birth date, the password, the height, weight, and the gender, and we're gonna change that variable to 1. If it goes through and doesn't find, I think what was happening to me is that this goes through the entire database, and it doesn't stop when it finds a record. It keeps going. So if you set this alert, patient's not in the database, if the first and last name that you type in, you hit search, they may be in there, but they may be like the 4th record. So the first record is going to say patient's not in the database. Second record, patient's not in the database. Patient's not in the database, and then it'll change it. Then the 5th record will be patient's not in the database. It got to be a real pain. This is how I fixed it. There are other ways to do this, and with coding, there are a million ways to do everything. This is simply how I did it. And I always like to see how everybody else does it. Sometimes it's better than mine, and I'll steal your code. But let's see if this works, and I'm pretty sure it does. So we hadn't covered that yet, but I just clear my stuff. Jane. Oh, and remember also validation. If I type in Jane Doe, what do you think is going to happen when I search? Not in the database. Why? Because it's case sensitive. She is in there as Jane Doe with capitals. That's another part of validation. A lot of times you may switch everything to upper or to lower or just title or however you want to do it, but you want to validate so that people can't screw it up. And people can definitely screw your stuff up. So once you think you got it running and perfect and you give it to somebody to try, they're going to break it. And you have to figure out how to not allow them to break it when they're using it improperly. At any rate, it pulls the stuff right out. Let's see. I want to look at Steve Rogers. Steve. How many of you spell Captain America's name like this? Rodgers. It drives me nuts. It's not. There's no D in it. I do that all the time. You hit search, it's going to bring up his birth date, his password, his height, and his weight. Maybe you don't spell Captain America's name. Let's see. What else we got in here? If you ever wanted to know how tall Anakin Skywalker was, search. Oh, it seems like all the cool people are like 6'2". I'm not 6'2". But yeah, so search works and it populates the form like it should. Perfect. What else have we got? Search database, delete a record from the database. Let's jump down here real quick. Clear the form. Super simple. Did I do that one already? Clear the form. Just like on your index, there was one line. Well, there'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in this one because you're clearing 6 inputs, right? All you're doing is getting the document with the ID tag. You're getting the element with the ID tag, and you're changing the value to nothing. And that's it. That's clear form. And we know it works because it just did it. Clear. Everything goes away. You can probably, I had messed with it. I'm sure you can get this to change back to mail, or if you had a third option that was like other, or just leave it because there's only 2 options. However you decide you want to handle that, it's up to you. You can still see like the first name. You can't even highlight it. First name, last name, 2 password, and this day, month. That stays there, and I like that. I believe that's a jQuery thing, because let's see. Yeah, so this placeholder, last name, placeholder, first name, that's what that grayed out text is. And I like that. I think that's really neat. Okay, where were we? Okay, delete a record from the database. It may take a minute to wrap your head around as well. Patiently, there we go. All right, we're going to try. Let's see what happens. And if it doesn't work, then a patient with the first and last name doesn't exist. Now, you could probably just do this with a regular if statement. I don't know why I use try catch. Just felt like it. Maybe because I did this confirm in here. So when they hit delete, we want to make sure they understand, hey, you are about to delete a record from the database. Is that something you really want to do? They need to click yes. If they click yes, we're going to loop through that database variable. we're going to find the record that matches the first name and the last name. This is kind of in reverse order as to what we did with the other ones, because we're looking at one thing first and then the other. But we're going to look at the database, first name, see if it's equal to the value of the HTML document, that input, whatever's in that input. And we're going to look at the database last name, see if it's the value is the same as the value in the input with text last name ID. And then we're going to mark that index. I probably could have done this in one if statement. Now that I'm looking at it, probably didn't need to put the index in here. I probably just need to put this up here. I'm gonna leave it because it works right now. So again, we're looking at the database with that index because we have a specific number now. We're going to see if it's equal to the value of the input, first name, and if the last name property is the same as the value in the input on the HTML page with last name. If it is, we're going to splice that index right out. Just pull it right out. And then we're going to throw it back into, remember we've got a stringify. We're going to set that patient DB to whatever the DB variable is. So remember, we're changing the variable and then we're throwing it back out to local storage. And then we let the user know that that patient was deleted. And of course, if they hit the button twice, they should get this. And if they're searching for somebody who's not in the database, they should get the notification when they do the search. But sometimes they'll be hitting the button and do it twice or something. Anyway, let's put that in there. Oops, wrong button. Oops, wrong button. All right, so let's see. Let's move Jane Doe. So we know we can search, we can get all her information up here, and we want to delete her. This is delete a client record from the database. Are you sure? And we hit OK, which makes it true. So it continues through that function. It says the patient data was deleted. Now you can look over here and see that she's gone. She was the 7th object, but it stays the same here. If you just wanted to be super thorough, you can come into this function here. And do that. Boom. Boom. Oh, I gotta change it in a different. Files, save all. Go back in, refresh the page. All right, well, let's add her back. I'm going to add Jane Doe. Patient was added because it checked. It said, hey, she's not in there, so I added her. See, she's the 7th thingamabobber object. We want to delete. You want to delete? Yes, you do. Okay, patient's been deleted. And now it blanks out all this. I just didn't tell it to do that in the function. It deleted it from the record, but it kept it up on the page. And I can see some value in that in case, oops, I really didn't mean to hit the delete button and then hit the confirm button too, but the data's still there. I could just add it right back. I don't know. How dummy proof do you want to make your stuff? It is cleaner and nicer, and it gives you that feeling that something happened when all that data changes. So however you do it, it's fine by me. I just want to make sure that you understand how all this works and getting into local storage. Now, generally, you're not going to use local storage like this. This is kind of a pseudo database for you that should be on a database server separate and apart from your application, so nobody can hack it and get any information out, because this is sensitive medical information that we're looking at right here, and you'd be subject to little HIPAA laws and fines and lawsuits and all other good stuff that we don't want to do. So that is that. I thought this was going to be a whole lot longer and a whole lot harder. I gave you most of the code here. If you're pausing and doing all that mess, I really want you to go through and do it on your own. I know that some of you are struggling. I'm happy to help you sit down and so you understand it. If nothing else, I hope that this lesson really was understandable by each of you, so you know it's how it works, and then you can go on and build your own applications to do the other things very similarly. I feel like there was something else. I don't know. Well, if I think of it, I'll let you know. Have a good week. Get your stuff turned in on time, and I'll see you next week.